time. So move your back body to touch just the basin of your pelvis, right? So you actually have a sense of the sacrum to touch into the bolster edge. And then when you position your feet together, I want you to sense that the blocks are under the legs, and it's important to have some height under the legs, especially for those of us that is fairly mobile in these areas. We want to keep them supported so that we can access some core delivery right in the pelvic floor, some core centering. So it just doesn't just kind of displace itself or go into prolapse. So you'll take a belt that's buckled into a loop overhead, and then as you pull, maybe a little bit of pulling at the belt forward, have enough space with the belt that you can slide it over your feet and then tighten it down so that the buckle is near your hip, okay? Or even a little higher if it's at your hip and that feels like it's uncomfortable, place it so it's an easy hand reach. And then as you guide back, if you have one sand, I want you to pause on using that in the beginning on your ribs. Your emphasis is lowering back and then establishing the lift of your blocks that is supportive of kind of the thighs relaxing. So if you can center your head back on your blanket, and then notice when your head is down, and it's literally your capacities for your neck to feel like it's releasing and beginning to let go. Then you have the legs with their slightly lifted position. And then that pelvic basin, that chamber is supported. And it's a pose about letting the edges of your body flow towards the center. So it's a center pose. Let the arms move wide so they're lifting off of the ground to start. So there's more of a hovering of your hands over the ground. And that might put some energy through the muscles of the inner arm. Good. And then take that left arm, just let that arm reach across the chest and bring your right hand to the left elbow. And I want you to just get that elbow and guide the arm across the chest. And if any time you have some challenge with the blocks under the legs, things kind of slip around, you can always adjust. And do what you need so you feel supported. That includes moments of casually breathing, your sensation in your core. So this is a little bit of a casual kind of entry into this pose. So we hold on to that left elbow with the right hand, and we give it a try to actually move the left elbow back besides our left ear, and then reach the left hand around towards the right elbow so you're in an elbow crisscross, right? So this might feel, when you're in this position, some direct traffic through the armpit chest, through the lung meridian. So what you might focus on today is just, again, that casual word of casually lifting through that lymph, through the armpit chest, through the funnel of the arms, for the tunnel. And we're not going to overdo the lung work, but we're going to get into it gradually because it's important today. Now with that motion of moving the arms back towards the chest, you're going to bring that right arm across, left hand to right elbow. And when you're reaching for the elbow with your hand, you might get a feel of the arm as a piece that crosses, but the movement of the arm shifts the back muscles, right? The upper back. So let that left hand, feel the arm and draw it across, but be as careful as possible that you're not kind of yanking too much. So the right amount, and the right amount might be when you kind of let the arm rest a little bit down into you. But you don't want to tug it off of its main chamber, right? The main hub, the center of you. Holding onto that elbow. Now bring it into an elbow crisscross so that I get both hands to the elbows and move the arms back. And adjusting the breath, centering the inhale through the core body. And on the exhale, experience. Notice if that's a contraction in the body or if it can be somehow emptying the lungs safely, kind of securing the channel of inhale. And then we take a bath for the senses here. So we'll move the hold of the elbows out with the hands. And then if you like to use that sandbag below the sternum where the ribs intersect, you might try that. If you decide not to use that, some of you may have started with your sand on your feet. I forgot about that good option, but that's the other option if you don't want the sand up here in your breathing corral. And if it's a little challenged or you're concerned, you'll find that this is strengthening. And if you're letting your arms relax down, emphasize the movement of the arms open. So as I mentioned, this pose is about opening and center, right? Opening the center. So with the arms motioned a little bit out, resting the back of the hand on the floor. Feel the ritual of in and out breath. Relax the face so that your senses can take a bath. That your eyes release, your nose feeling its normal rhythm of breathing. Then let the shoulders feel as if they're resting, not trying to squeeze back, overdoing it, but just let them rest back. So inhaling, pacing the breath for 4 to 5 counts in. Make it comfortable, not overdoing. And then exhaling out of the mouth for 5 to 6 counts. Feeling the flow of breath. We will remain with this positive sensation through the arms relaxing, right? So the emphasis that might be different is to kind of pause on the squeezing of the blades. So as I say that, I still sometimes have some concentration there. So my emphasis is the chest muscles opening. And they may naturally be contracting depending on your environment. They may have some defensiveness here. And so this is important, right? To let the body kind of evolve into the state of releasing and opening and sort of recycling. Now removing any sand that's on the ribs. If it's on the feet, you'll be able to shift it off on its own. But we'll remove the sand. And then we'll take a moment to unbuckle. So I want you to release that clasp and even move the belt off of the legs. And then take the block, set them a little bit out to the sides, and slide the feet so they position a little closer towards you. And then you will need a ball or a sandbag to the outer left leg. So getting that eye down and take that right foot up. Now, this will be a little different. You'll need a block for this as well. But when you move that right knee, it kind of naturally just poses open. It's a simple pattern of movement, but when you get a block, you'll put that block to the inner right leg and add some pressure. And I would add just not all of your pressure with your hands holding the block into that leg. So my block could be flat, it could be the mid setting. So it depends kind of on your arm length, I think. But I'm finding that even I can do the block at the low setting because I like to feel a little wider pressure to the leg. Now this will be a sequence where you have two options. You can keep the block or you can put it aside in the next few moments, but I'll kind of coach us through this kind of multi-option and see what works for you. So I have the block, I'm pushing into the leg, and I'm actually going to veer the legs towards the left. Okay, on that ball. So if you don't have a ball, you got a sandbag or something wadded under that left leg, because you don't want your left thigh, especially at the knee, the left knee to be touching the ground. You want that to be up. So I'm going to keep that block pushing a little bit into that right leg, and I'll give it about another 30 seconds. So you get a feel that your legs are kind of veering over, straight over to the left. Okay. And if this is a pretty good pulse for you, you feel it in your flexor and maybe a little bit of combination through inner leg, top leg. And then you can move the block aside and hold on to that right knee with your left hand. And then you're guiding the knee towards the left. I know it's going to probably be a minute movement from where you started when you got the knee with your hand, but its directional intensity is towards the left. So if you want to stay with the block, pushing into the leg, you can stay with that, or come into the hold of the knee and feel the right arm relax open. I want to encourage you to keep the arm open and down, not behind you or besides your head. The idea is opening the lungs. And we're going in a restorative channel, so it's subtle and it requires patience, which isn't always very subtle energy, is it? So feel the spine touching back and scan where the base of your spine is touching. Do you notice how far down the back touches to the bolster? Is it all of your back? You do want to try for that. Very good. So when we shift the side, I want you to let go of that knee or put the block down, one or the other, both. And then you get a feel here for your body shifting to that second side, uncross, and then bring that left foot to the right knee. Move the ball to the right leg or any other object that you're using besides the upper outer right thigh. And then get a block, press it to that left leg, and make the motion very clean. So it's like if your leg is contracting when you push into it, it just doesn't like that pressure. See if you can modify a little bit. Maybe the block goes higher on the leg. Maybe for some of you, it goes closer to the knee. And then get that felt sense of the body veering over to the right with both of the legs. That kind of everything below the rim of the hips is veering to the right. This might be a pretty classic study in crossover work, right? How you can isolate the lower branches, the lower extremities. Yeah, I kind of like this side with the block pushing. I could add that hold of the knee and cross it, but it feels better for me on this side with the block. So you decide if you want to add on that hold of the knee with your right hand and steering it towards the right. That's fine and dandy with you. That's okay. Another thing you might notice when you are doing either of those, block or hand, your right lower leg right now over to that inner thigh spectrum, the adductor, if it feels like it's pulsing or a tightening condition in the tissue, you might really get that right outer foot relaxing on the floor, so you're not trying to push down on the bottom of the foot, and really engage in moving that leg open, because it's half a cobbler's pose, this position. So you are feeling through this left hip. If at any time you want to remove the block and hold on to the knee, but the left arm is releasing open. Now each side has its own little tango that you have to work with in its circulation dynamic. So you play with it. That's the fun of being in a home practice, is you kind of try some of the offerings and maybe add something in that's useful for you. Breathe slow and sort of deep, right? You don't want to go so much that you struggle with relaxing. So you find that right current, that right wave of breath. It comes in waves. So good for you trying to get the energy current to gradually help you align in the pose. And then we let go of the knee. And then as you, or if you have just the block, you're going to move that aside. And then position back up, and we're going to try a supported bridge pose here. So you'll need simply a block. And I want you to be aware of where your belt is. So if that's under you, just kind of slide it away. If you have a blanket on top of your bolster, you'll need to move it back. Now that's going to cause like this rib opening. Just some subtle movement with a blanket can work some wonders. So you might like this for a moment, just kind of to feel the circulation in the ribs, right? When you're breathing slightly, challenge. These are good things to emphasize, simple stuff. So put a block under the pelvis. And then as I kind of shift and move my body so I'm comfortable on top of the props, I've got my head in a little bit of a tilt, right? So you'll notice the back of your head, the occipit's probably tilting forward. So you want to have some room at the very base of the skull to your upper back. C7 has space here, right? It's not pushing down. So you're not jamming your chin to your chest. Okay, so feel that condition and stretch both of your legs. And as they reach down, I want you to find them to space out. I mean, I don't know if your legs know how to do that, but feel your feet apart and even make that positioning apart a little more comfortable for your back muscles. Right? There comes a place if you put the feet too far out, then the back really gets wonky. But you find this expansiveness that's not any wider than your mat likely. That's a good tester. It's like a little bit inside my mat works nice. And then I find the feet in a little more neutral, so less pushing with the heels to be perfect. And then feel where your arms are close by your sides. And feel the shoulders move back. That means to the floor, to the bolster first. And then align your assignment of breathing right to the center of the chest. And closer to the awareness now to the belly. So once we move from just chest breathing, we feel the abdomen move with the breath. So this is like a variation on a standing pose, but we're on our back getting ready for side sage. So I want you just to feel this core ribbon of movement with your breath. So feel how the breath casually lifts in the lower abdomen. And then visualizing, and it might even happen besides thinking about it, it might occur that it's working. The breath is moving horizontally. So that could just be a thought. Okay, it goes across versus pulling up to your chest. Yeah, which is a different, it's a tightening of the lungs when you just do chest breathing. So, visualize that with kind of accordion style breathing. And now, when we're going to move around to the rib side, this would probably be the most helpful for your lungs. This is where we're moving with the sage pose. So slide the feet in, feel the knees apart, and the sense of pushing down, but not lifting your hips yet. So you just push your feet downwards. So the thighs maybe fill up. Now, I want you to lift up just a titch, just a little tiny, tiny bit that you can slide the block away. So just that smallest amount. And then once your spine goes back to that nice arch, reserve the arch for these poses, the lumbar arch. Okay. Now we're going to be moving to side sage, and I prefer you try to keep this real classical blending of movements, so it's not necessarily the most serene moments for you, but you take the movement seriously for the skill level here. So if you have a ball, you might get it kind of close. Don't worry about it if you don't. Side sage doesn't always require that, but have it nearby. And then you're going to turn the hips moving over to the right, and then when you roll to that left side, I want you to turn, and there's this kind of hiccup where you've got to get up the bumpy road, right, to get back up to your hip side. But turn your bolster, and then get a couple blankets stacked. Whatever you got, towels, blankets on the other side of your bolster, or a blend of the two. And when you line that up, you're going to use a block or a ball on the inside of the right leg. And with that positional support, I generally like to feel that my knee is angling just a bit back so that the front of this right thigh can relax. So the idea is trying to stretch it. The restorative yoga is about opening, not so much like deep stretching. So we kind of have to figure that out sometimes, is that opening this whole line of energy into the front of that right knee. So as you lean down, you've got sand on your side. You get sand on your side. Okay, and then as that is positioned how you like it, you might need a block overhead for your hand. I find that to be really nice to use. More than once long ago, I like to have support for my length of my side. And so when you do line up your side beam, you'll kind of notice, does your right arm feel better when it's relaxed down, not pushing over? Maybe you feel your hand crosses to the bolster. And then if your head is turning back, I want you to feel that you can be on the side. And maybe that hand does get up to the block, but again, if it feels uncomfortable anywhere in the arm, shoulder, it's mostly the shoulder that would have the effect, then you come back to a different position. So feeling when you're on the side of your head, the circulation in your jaw, your face. And then get into that awareness of breathing through the side. Now, if you need to let your head roll to the back a little bit, be sensitive to what feels best for your neck. Maybe it's a little higher blanket. It's important to truly notice what feels comfortable in all things for the neck. And that might mean the arms overhead. Might not. So the expansion in the ribs, you want to feel this awareness of the side body expanding. And then relaxing. Yeah, and how good for you to bring focus to this part of your experience in your body, the breathing muscles, the respiratory channel. So it is a bit of the upper respiratory tree, which is kind of what I think our brains compute as the breathing cycle is upper. But there's, lower respiratory. So I would emphasize, instead of being kind of stiff with your breathing, really be slow and curious. And then if you feel like letting your head turn in a different direction so you can soothe into the neck. Because that cycle of breathing is generally still contained with awareness in the nose. You got to use that filter. And it's filtering a lot, right? So it's our greatest filter, but you want to use also moving out through the mouth. So this will be a pretty interesting set we're going to go into with these ribs and breathing cycles. So when you feel that this right side is exposed, you're going to kind of motion into it. So it's still going to be in that range of opening. It's just going to be turning and shifting in the muscles and the core muscles. So when you move that sand aside, I want you to turn in towards that left rib cage, right? And so when you come up, if you kind of get up fast, see if you can get your ribs to move, not like your ribs are limbs, but using that muscular connection with your breathing muscles to get yourself to lift using your core. So you're going to come up, and I think you can leave your props back there. I think so. We'll see. So we're going to come up and we're going to kind of feel the sides continuing, but this is how we'll work it. We'll take our seat on the bolster. Okay, our left leg is bending and it's turned out. So I have this option to put a sandbag on it. If your knee is comfortable kind of pointing out and down, then put a sandbag on the top of the leg. Well, not the very top, but top of the inner thigh. Okay. So we cross the right leg over the left. I suppose you might need another prop, huh? Okay, before you get too stuck, get a block or two. I think 2 would be ideal, but 1 is fine too. That sounds funny. 2 is ideal, but 1 is fine too. Back to the 2. Okay, so you got your, it sounds like an eye exam. Back to the 2. Do you like the 2 or the 3? Okay, so you turn towards the left and you're going to put your hands down onto block or floor. So, it's quite a QL stretch. So I find that probably my block height is going to stay at the second setting. It's not going to go up for me. I could feel a little bit more ease if it's higher. So if you want your block height up, go with that. Then you have your blocks under your forearms. And when you're leaning down, there is this directional pulley, right? It's kind of prying, or it's more of a pulley through the side of the right side of the waist, okay? So if it's too much with both arms down, this is something I work with as well, is I put one of my blocks up higher, the right one, because it's that right side I'm working with. And then my left arm is a little lower. Okay. So that's okay, because when you take a twist, you know, you have different heights with your spine. So it's not like you're doing an incorrect set for your back, but you want to be able to center your arms down so they're not kind of trying to get off of the blocks. So feel when your head is turned down towards the floor, right? So my head direction is weighted. Oh, I like this for the breathing in the back body. If it gets too much with your arms in this position, you can bring your right arm behind your back. This might be a nice lead to where we're going anyhow. Then it puts more weight in the left arm, so you'll notice this weight dependency you have on your limbs. I know we're so dependent on our legs for all the travel and our arms to pry things around, but the core is important to include. So take a core reach here. So you're gonna bring your right hand to your back. You're gonna turn your waist towards your front, so towards the right leg, or both legs, truly. And then I would let the right hand reach to that knee and let that knee resist. So when you come up, you're gonna let that right knee resist. So you're holding onto it, but the knee's not, you're not gonna pull the knee over. So the leg has some strength and resistance. And then you're gonna come up, so use that core resistance to get up. I guess it's core collaboration. Hold on to that right knee and then take a twist to the right. So my weight now is transferred much better in my right sitting bone. You might even feel that you kind of move your sitting bone down. And then door one is to hold the knee, twisting to the right, breathing. And door two is to straighten the right arm or left arm and turn to the right. Today, this feels better for me as holding the knee, but I can see a reason for either. The challenge you might pose to yourself, pose to yourself, is to pull that knee up high and hook the elbow and crank around. So I want you to do something where you're working on loosening up, not gripping more. You might use your hand to hold the knee, but feel the body rotate. And feel the last thing that turns is your head. And come back, center. Take the right foot down in front of the left knee. Take the sand over to the right upper inner thigh. Reset the legs so that you can feel a cross-legged position and kind of expansive at the bottom, the rear, right? So you feel like it's centered, it's not squished in. And then we take our double block path forward. And we feel that the blocks are high up and we have a little bit more arch in the spine. And then you decide now, if you have another object to put underneath, you might put the ball under your left knee or the right leg, or stuff a towel there if it just feels like kind of cranky and they need some support. And when you're leaning down, you might feel your spine move with the direction. It's funny if you can sense if after this amount of time in your practice, just today alone, when the body gives you a message to either kind of lean into it, or if there's resistance that you can kind of feel on a deeper level than like following the motion. So just kind of clear up what you can. That's kind of what we're up to. And noticing inner thigh, right hip, And I'm not trying to push it far down right now. I'm just kind of centering up on my sitting bones, tilting. And maybe a little cat cow so my back all the way into my neck feels supported. Remember, motion is very lubricating to the back, to the spine, spaces, and the sides of the spine. Okay, now when we come back to pigeon, right, we'll move our rib cage center and we'll take our blocks out. But what's behind you will probably be a little bit of a reset, right? So I'm just going to use my 2 blankets today on this one, because I know we're going to go from pigeon in the back to side safe. So I don't need to like do a big redo back there. But when I move the left knee down, and then I take that right leg back, I center my right thigh top on the bolster. So you kind of have to find a way so that your knee isn't turning in and torquing, right? It's like this right knee, you want to feel that quadricep kind of lower down. Now try it from being on your elbows or on your blocks. You could be on your blocks with your forearms, that's fine. Or you could be a little lower on the floor. But this might be the time when you kind of navigate how the top of the back thigh layers down. I get here and it's like I'm kind of stuck, right, with getting things to really shift and turn. So you generally are doing the best you can in these pretzel positions, I'm sure. But coordinate so that your head lowers down. You can always put your hands in a little bit of a stack and put your head down. If that's too much, then you're a little bit higher up, or you have a block under your forehead, right at the very little bit in from the hairline. Yeah, I find that something simple for me is just to let my head tilt without any pressure. And if you let this pigeon pattern be very direct and forward with your rib cage, and then with your hip balance, you might move a little bit of weight over to that left hip just to kind of go side to side, a rhythm of moving. Feel the arch in the spine start to loosen up. So instead of trying to make more of a dent in your back, which is trying to push the ribs forward, I want you to pause and try to get that to be a little more neutral. And then slow, deep breath, ribs, and center. It's fun to change the dynamic of the breathing from one direction to the next, even though it seems like just something you're doing all the time. But when you slow down and tailor the brain focus to that, it can be somewhat illuminating for your inner environment, how much it probably does, especially when it feels compromised too, right? With the air around us, it can make a difference. So walk the hands on back towards your legs. And then this is, for some of us, how pigeon used to be, right? I don't know where your practices moved from, but oftentimes it was this arch and we held that. But when we smooth it out and come around with the right knee forward, we're going to center our feet to Baddha Konasana. So that simply is the feet together. And Konasana means angle, bound angle. So feet are together. And then when you're here, I want you to be centered and up. And then take a block over, and it doesn't need to be way overhead, but I find just feel the curve of my arm when the elbows are bending and I hold the block. And then I reach the block back and bending, of course, the hands hold the block on the sides and my elbows kind of tilt up. And then what my work is on moving my elbows in towards the sides of my head and stretching them back. Yeah, and this way you can do this mild, medium. Okay, you can kind of change the intensity. So if I get my hands to just again hold the block, they don't need to force in. I want you to focus on the elbows moving back versus jamming your hands into the block. Lift up the arms as up as they want to go. Now I'm not going to go full straight. I'm just going to kind of feel into my arm movement and my ribs and my lungs and bending. So take a few of these alternating lifts and lowers and be curious about when you lift up your breath content, right? The intensity when you lift up the block. I know the block is pretty light, but when you're moving your muscles in this concentration, it can feel like a reasonable amount of weight. Okay? How about that? Okay, so lower down your block behind you, and then we're still with it, hopefully. You can always pass on the poses. And then as you move that block anywhere, it goes, bring your hands to your shoulders and roll the elbows up and out and back. I think the out and back is the tricky part here. So creating these little motions. Now the legs are going to swing the knees to point up. So a little bit of a core branch. Try to be on your bolster. In fact, you don't want to fall off the back here, but bring your arms forward, round your back so you're in more of a cat shape of your spine. Hands just on the knees, and then inhale, lifting up the spine and up the breath to sitting upright. And then bring your hands to your bolster and slide down on the floor in front and turn to your right side for side stage. I already kind of know that I need my blanket a little higher. This just feels better on my neck. And that might be different if you have a rounded bolster here, right? So if I have a rounded bolster instead of a flat one, my blankets would not be this high. It would be lower. So that may be what I was conditioning myself for a while. I'm now finding, and part of it's finding what would be a good rhythm. And so take side stage, go ahead and go into your shape. But get a feel here of the side. Now, the last one when I went into this, I kind of pushed my bolster. So it wasn't straight across. So keep it straight across, otherwise you're not keeping your shape aligned very well. One side is a little bit challenged sometimes. And then add sand perhaps. Okay. Now on this side, I'm going to have my head tilted a little more because I like to be sure everybody's okay. For some reason, I want to keep my eye over there. But, you know, find what's best for your neck. And you might surprise feeling the back more towards the back feels better for your jaw, the sensation that's higher up on the neck. And just be curious, like you're trying to get yourself towards a calming inner environment. So the curiosity is important. The ball might work. You might need to adjust things. It might be a little bit chaotic. So feel if you get a touch of the block overhead. Is that a good thing? I'm trying to get things right. You know, for me, it's this ball sometimes on my inner leg that I want to have in the right shape for the leg shape to feel like it's this whole side beam is lengthening. So as you come in, feel the rhythm of moving the breath. Feeling the weight of your hips. And then enjoy that there is weight there to help you have a ground and a routine for the pelvis, right? And then the lift up from the pelvis and the core. And since the organs are kind of in a swirling experience through the whole class, right? You kind of squish them and you expand them and you're, dilating through that space. I mean, it's all this kind of juicing and marinating. And I'm sure that there's some good that comes from that for the digestion and so forth. So things might get a little bit of, you might hear some rubble, some sounds, who knows. And then feeling the movement of breath. Make sure that left arm is not comfortable. If you were doing a little much with it, you might pause and bring the hand down. And maybe turn your head so you feel a different movement through the neck. These can be classified as gentle neck stretches, right? Nothing too much, just center. Now this will take this side into a full expression. So when we move the sand, and then we move the left knee towards the right, and we roll. Now, see if you can just come right on up, not get too judgmental about how your ribs move to get you there this time, and then get on up so that right knee is open and the sand is on. You want to have your blocks this time. Let me get that set first. Got blocks. Okay. You can have a t-shirt that says got blocks. All right. So I've got my sand on that right thigh. And then as the left leg is crossing over, let's suppose pose. If it's not a knee positive thing for you to cross your leg over, this might pose a problem for the bottom knee for some. You could do this whole set with your foot in front, right? This way, you could turn, you could twist. You don't have to pull the knee of the leg over. It just simply, if it works out and you can do it and there's no issues in your tissues with discomfort, you might really let it gel in your system and just kind of feel some of these shapes, pelvis, ribs, right, hip work. And then when you turn to your right, so I'm rotating, this is where, you can't see me very well on this side, can't you all? But I think you get the idea. It looks like you've got it for it. Confusion, no? It's okay. All right. So when you put over your direction on that right side, so for me, I would probably get my block under my left elbow a little bit higher. But if you can go down with both arms, with both elbows down, and your shape, you can sense that the spine is lifting, right? It's kind of lifting out of the pot of the pelvis, right? It's right up out of it. Same thing. So when I rotate, there's always work to do on this one, right? There's always further to go. This whole kidney flow of energy could be stifled, right? So you want to work on getting that open. It spends a lot of energy getting kind of pushed and compressed, or it's jolted, one or the other. So use the blocks wisely. I'm going to bring mine up to the highest height and see if I can get both comfortably down. A little better for me. So now feel how high in your spine you're turning, right? It's not, your lumbars are pretty much set because your seat is on the bolster. Now your left buttock is like a little up, okay? So if my left knee points up, as up as it can go, and I lean over to the right. Now I bring my left hand to my back, and then I lift up to the crown of my head, and then I turn, right? I'm gonna hold onto my left leg and bring my left hand to the blanket. Or maybe you decide to keep it around your back, okay? But spend the energy on kind of closing the gap here so you get a feel that this is a compact position. And you know, one side you might feel like, oh, I can get my arms straight. It just feels like it's meant to be. One side you might prefer to hold. That's the way it is for me today. So, you know, if you're a little out of sorts, you know, who knows, do the best that you can with the moment in front of you here. So if it feels better for your arm to be straight, just let it be straight. If it's bending and it's calming, go with that. And there's something to be said for even letting that left hand find a little bit more comfort. I don't want you to strain your shoulders. Feel the chest walls open. But you probably hear a very little injury in the span of the body, unless there's an actual impact injury. Very rare. Very, very rare. The shoulders, yes, for certain. So just working with opening the chest is going to be helpful, period, right? It doesn't need to be overdoing a back bend, but opening the chest. And opening it without tightening the neck is, I think, a little challenge with my focus field is opening without gripping my neck. Okay, now unwind, come forward, don't get too wrapped around your spine. So take this hand to the left leg, taking that cross-legged position. You're getting a little wound up, huh? And then as I move here into this forward motion, have my rib lifted, like it's one, it's many, but rib lifting. And then to lean forward, I need something under one or the other leg. It doesn't necessarily have to be right or left, but I feel like a little tilted, not quite centered. So if I use my props to support, I put both of the blocks in the front. Yeah, of course, there might be an option to put your blocks lower, but feel all the way up to the neck how you can lengthen. Be slow, but even movement might be a better ritual for you here, is to round the back and arch the spine. That might be helpful for you right now. Feel that openness through the hips. I feel limiting. Now, when you lean down, now this is one type of hip opening. It's a seated, cross-legged. Some people call this double pigeon, right? But double pigeon would be if you had the legs stacked. I don't want to do that pose because of the joint pressure, but I'll call this double pigeon for the manner of the connection of the hip. You call it anything. Okay, so when we take pigeon pose, we give you a little bit of an awareness where we're going. We're going to be moving back and then kind of doing a little bit of hands knee flow, and then on our back again, and then we'll do inversion. So it'll be kind of go smooth. But when you stretch your left leg back, now take that second pigeon side and get a feeling of the movement reaching through, not just like a leg push back, but feel if you move your elbows down and then you try to kind of shift around your hips, or maybe you feel better when you're up and you try to shift your hips. So the second side could greet you with a new sensation. And kind of the pull of the hip. I like the elbows down, so I'm gathering some circulation positives in my shoulders. Even though maybe forearm balance is not like, it's not a practice for me now, might be again someday, but I'm just trying to be careful that circulation in my shoulders and my neck are comforting, but I still get some circulation bonus here, some strength. So Sphinx pose is what this really is. The arms, elbows right into the shoulders. I think they are. Looks like they are. Now the weight transfer is likely kind of a little 50-50 for some of us on each of the hips. Of course, they're directionally positioned opposite. One knee is pulled up, one leg is back. But kind of feel around the tailbone area if you're kind of stuck. I mean, this is a little bit tricky to do large movements because of the position of the leg. So when you do, bring your head down, push into your palms, walk the hands back, feel the arch of the spine. Now to come back to hands and knees, do you feel like you need to have an arch back, like when your hands push, your arms are straight? Then you kind of mount the toes under, lift up and push back, or some of us might want to be a little lower and then push back. So play with it, slide the top of that left thigh on the bolster, feel the arch, and then find what's good for you, maybe neutral, a little bit more to plank pose to get back. But if you do move through plank, I would just take it for a few moments and kind of work with that strength with the arms underneath your shoulders. Just try it. I mean, it's moments. If you get fatigued, bring the knees down, still try it. And so even if I put my knees down and I feel where the hands push, I want you then to put your knees down and then stretch back. So we're going to turn the bolster length straight forward and front, right under us, straight forward. Take a blanket away. And then as I move forward and down on the bolster, you have to kind of find a satisfying position of the bolster so it doesn't feel uncomfortable under your core. It just holds underneath the base. But you still feel that nice arch. Now, feel Sphinx pose when your core is supported, right? And pause on trying to like completely lower your head. See if you can find a way to have your elbows under you. I know you gotta pretend, it's a cat pretend moment, really is. It might not be completely pleasant sensations, but this is one of their shapes that they like to hold. So the knees are apart. I don't think my cat's knees are like this, so. I'll have to watch next time how they are posing with their back body, with their arms here. So when the legs are back behind, I want you to feel when you bend your knees and you draw your feet, you don't necessarily draw them towards your seat. You kind of bend the knees and you feel the arch, and you might even feel one shoulder more than the other. The places you compensate, to find balance. And then lower down the feet and slide the hands back so they're positioned to support you. Maybe they're under your shoulders, maybe they're farther back. But I want you to feel like, I got my hands where I feel I can get myself to go to up dog. So that means your spine is arching. So lift up your head. I guess lift up the torso, push everything upwards in the front. Feel the arch. And then bring your elbows close by the sides and lower down. I want you to keep going with this one. So you inhale up. And you exhale down. And the continuous movement is key without turning your head. So you want to find alternating lift. And then lower. Yeah, and your arms might get a little bit of energy moving through into the hand. Then come back to table. And push the bolster forward so it's kind of out of your way here. You got lots of room. And reach your paws forward. Your hands are wide and your head lowers down. You're in sort of a pseudo child's pose. You're not completely committed to your hips back on your feet, but you're reaching. And try to keep the hands wide, toes under. And now when you lift up your knees, I know the weight presets into your hands there, it was preset, but open out the hands. And I think just coming into dog pose different ways all the time makes it somewhat interesting to do. So my feet are in a wide stance and the chest is open. It's a challenge. It's a challenging pattern. So come back down to the knees. And I want you to try this version of coming into dog pose. So you're gonna have the hands about shoulder width now, maybe tiny bit wider, but bend your elbows and then lift up with the elbows still bending. And then see if you can, they're a little bent. They don't need to be fully straight right now. They're a little bending. And step your feet wide. So a wide stance is no wider than a mat, maybe a little bit in. And then feel when you start to bring your hands out to the edge of the mat, straighten the arms, and then let your head dangle. So you feel like you're in a wide stance with both upper and lower limbs. Good. Give it a sense of travel through the extremities. And then walk your hands back all the way to your feet or your feet forward a little bit till you can find your stride of your feet under you. And then let the spine, I'm going to give you two options here, actually three. You can either hold your elbows and forward fold. You can let your head dangle. You can let your arms dangle. And then the third option is you can take your belt and hold the belt with your palms facing towards your legs, so they're facing forward. And then you'll bring your belt back, up, and over the back. Not necessarily overhead, but just over the back. Hands are wide. This might feel just right for you, right? If you're not sure about the simple arm down positions, you might try the belt just for something different. And then feel how the circulation really changes to your face. Feel the arms moving over the back and really stretch into those arms. But they don't get a lot of it, do they? They get some muscling in class or turning here side to side, but really feel that circulation traveling through the arms into the chest. Great. And then if you have the belt, I want you to gradually get rid of it from your hands and then feel your arms relaxing down. So the head lowers, the feet feel a significant degree of pressing, and the skin cells of the face feel the most, right? So it's a good facial. It does change your circulation in your breathing right up into your upper lungs. It gets pretty saturated. Everything goes to the face and the brain, all the circulation. Okay, now come back to our shifting our hands back and front. So you're going to walk on forward with your hands and then down with the knees. And then we're going to come back to a child's pose of choice, which is knees wide, hands open. And then let's say you go into this version and it's too much on your knees. Then you'll put a blanket on top of your calves. So just do it if it feels like it's just a little too much, or you just want to have more padding. I like to put a blanket there on top of my calves and then lower down. And you can also use your bolster under your forehead here. This is nice. I like that a lot. That feels more pleasant. So if this is not enough height under your seat, you can always make it 2 blankets, 2 towels. So then your hips are quite a bit up without that pushing into the knees. But release in the back. Of course, the bolster could be all the way underneath you too. You could tuck it up to the center of the knees, and then you have even more support. master child's pose here. This would be a child master pose, if there's such a thing. Okay, we'll make it so. So give it a few more moments here. If you're in the full bolster one, you just found that, you might give it extra few moments just to get that lined up. Head turns one side. Now, if you're not a jazzed up child poser, right, you can do a flow practice, forward and back, up dog, back towards moving the hips back. You can do that too. And if you haven't turned your head, turn your head the other direction if you're using a bolster. Now we're going to come forward. So shift your bolster in the front if it isn't there already. And then I want you to slide any leg forward like you would form into a seated position. And then take a position of your feet up on the bolster. Okay. And we'll move a belt. So we got our belt. I'm kind of looking at how I want to use the belt. What I was hoping, I think I'll go with it. We'll have our blanket way to the back. Some of you will pass on using it, but it's going to be there for another pose anyway. But you'll put a block or a ball. The tradition is a block, so we'll go with it. We'll go with a block, traditional. So block between the knees, narrow. And then when you lower onto your back, I want you to take, I think I'm going to use my blanket under my head. Feels better for my neck today. So you can decide on your, if you have a blanket under your head or not. But we have a block, and now just let that be kind of this kind of narrowing experience with your feet on a bolster. Make sure the feet do feel like they're on the bolster, not kind of sort of. The bolster's under your feet. It's not like it's barely pushing on. And then you'll take a belt. You're going to unbuckle it so it's a wide belt. I'm going to double up my belt. It's not buckled together, but so it has a little bit more reinforcement for my handling. It's a little easier on my fingers usually. I just doubled it up. Now, when you lift up your hips, I want you to bring your arms overhead. Okay, now the blanket was not feel good. It was good for a second there, but okay. The belt goes overhead. Now, again, the reasoning why you might not use a blanket is because it causes a lot of that cervical, not a lot, but it causes rounding. Cervical vertebrae doesn't need more of that. And then when we lower down the spine, I'm going to move my arms holding my belt. So I want you to use this as a steady practice here. So steady and steady, steady, steadily. So it's kind of basic and plain. You go into bridge pose, you push down, you hold the block because it's not a absorbable prop. You can't really squeeze it like a ball, so it's very standard. So you bring your belt overhead, you pull though. And then you let the spine go down, your arms go just towards the ceiling straight up. Now feel when your spine is all the way down, you might kind of do a little bit of a shimmy with your shoulders, feel hold the belt, maybe nod your head. Kind of feel what's on the back body touching down. If you need your blanket, you can always add it. Don't resist if it feels uncomfortable. So we have the hands holding that belt. Now I want you to make sure you're holding the belt wider than shoulder width, so you have plenty of space for your upper shoulder. And then when you are moving your arms now back, go ahead and move them back without lifting the hips up. Move the arms back and over. Okay, benefit, I got my blanket there, so I have a nice pad for it. And then as you push down into your feet, you're going to lift up your hips. I want you to secure that hold on the belt the whole time, and then lift the hips up so you feel that circulation working across the front of the legs. It's probably feels like you're holding it. You're holding it here. So the pelvic floor has that sensation. Okay, not that we have to train that for much time, but I want you to feel when you squeeze into that block. And then when you move your spine down, you still have your arms overhead. Okay, now let the spine have a sense of rounding like a cat pose. Good, and then feel when the spine centers down. And then try to keep it with a little bit of a scoop so it's like your tail is in. And then as you lift up your hips one more time, everything's pretty contained in the pelvis here as you lift up. You now bring the belt so it's towards the ceiling, because everything's lifting up, even the arms, the hips. It's going in that direction, knees pointing up. Okay, now keep the hips up, but bring the arms back overhead. It's like a game. Now keep the hips up and the arms go back. And then release the hold on the belt and bring the arms down besides your, well, they're on the floor besides the hips, so they're forward and down. And then get a feel of your elbows bending just naturally. I don't want you to force them to bend deeper, but feel your arms basically straight, but that softening of the elbows. Okay, now, this is really tricky because I don't know if anyone has another block around them. So let's do this to be kind. You're going to lower your spine. In general, find something that'll be kind. Bring your knees to your chest, hit the block. Now we'll have it. Now lift up to bridge and then slide the block underneath at the second height if possible. If it's out of category for you to go up with that second height, go with the low height. Okay. And here's when you might add your blanket. I'm still going to go without. I'm going to hold the back of my skull and just let that lengthen back. Kind of, if you can find time here and there, which it's to hold the back of your skull and give just a little space. I mean, this is kind of the part of your body. I mean, you can massage your feet and different things and move and stretch and pelvis and all that stuff. But holding your skull is, I think it's a little science to that stuff. I mean, you'll pay people to do cranial work, but to try to get yourself to do that work it's like you just don't bother or something. So we're going to do a little brain float in a moment, but I want you to get a feel here of just that touching of the skull. It's pretty essentially you've got connection to the brain, any way to live. And then when you take your feet up, circulation. So the whole final part of this class will be about that circulation to the brain. Yeah, if you don't like this position with the neck, remember you could use a really flat blanket, but it needs to be really flat, not bulked up. Okay, now the arms could be attentive down, forward towards the fingers towards the bolster. Shoulders just center back. Just try. I mean, if they're tough and they're very rigid, do a little bit of that work centering them back. Okay, and the feet likely will try to fling a little bit towards your chest. So this block is helpful because it kind of keeps them a little bit more straight up. The block is less squishy than a bolster. Avoid rolling your head side to side in this position. Breathing through belly, diaphragm. Or did the diaphragm come first? I don't know. Diaphragm first and belly? What does the belly mean? Circle the feet. Feel motion in the bottom of you, especially since the feet get stood on most of the time. They have kind of a bizarre life, right? How they get pressure into them. So give them some of this stuff, this turning, spinning, some downtime, but they're up. That's downtime for a foot, right, is when they're up. Uptime. Now, can you let your tail rest into that block? Just kind of feel that it's such a narrow piece. It's like a little balance beam. You're trying to rest your tailbone on. Pretty much. as balanced beanie as you're gonna get. Now, as you bend through your knees, you're gonna lower down, and then I want you to lift up the hips right away and slide the block away, and then find your belt. We're gonna line this up in a good timing. So you're going to keep those hips up, get your blanket slided under your head, lower your spine. Okay, bring your right knee in, take your belt under your foot, and then you're gonna need to, well, you could make your glute first actually, but you're gonna make a fairly wide loop. And when you place that wide, you can always make it a little bit shorter, but I want you to make sure there's plenty of belt. Stretch the left leg down, relax it on the bolster, and then get your belt to that occiput. So you're gonna find where on the back of your skull, there is a place that you can position your belt that hooks around your skull and gives you some nice traction through the neck. Okay, let your arms rest and feel the circulation dynamic. And rather than forcing the hamstring to get as much pull as possible, this is a little different than we do when we do brain float with the hips on the bolster. It's, I think, a little more easygoing, relaxing for my neck. It's a little casual. So you could put your sand on the top of your left thigh. You could go without. Sand might be nice here. Doesn't have to be what you use though. You might go without any extra props in the belt, what you are doing right now. If you use the sand, it will likely bring just a little dose more into the right hamstring. It might feel subtle but aware in the calf and the back of the leg. So finding a way of letting your head release back, doing a little bit of that pull with your foot. You can always put your finger pads really below the brainstem, right where it connects to the neck, and just kind of mild palpation. Just notice if that space is kind of fried and see if you can give it some blood flow, opening. The interesting thing on this pose is it's two different legs that you're working, but it's one brain and one neck, right? So the neck will get the continuous awareness. Slide off any sand, move the foot up that was on the bolster, and then change the side. Use your hands. Yeah, adjust so that you're feeling supported. It's gonna fuss with your, whatever your hair experience is, right? So you kind of have to let that all go. It just would ruin it if you try to keep that together. So if you put your sand onto that right leg and you had it on the first time, do use it on the second side. You don't have to use any sand though, but you might just find to kind of put the bulk of your sand on the top of your thigh. So it could be straight on, it could be turned, could be a little bit more on your front of your hip bone. But in general, just that hip flexor energetic would be nice to have this support, isn't it true? Just in general. General generosity. And now with a slow breath. Exhale. Yeah, some of us will feel comfortable with that extra stretch of the neck. Some are going to want the head to lean back. So monitor how it feels now that you've had this long of a stretch through the back of the skull. It might start to gel a bit. Feel good. Now, as you move the sand away, you're going to take that belt carefully, hold onto it with your hands, take the belt off the back of your head back, maybe unblanket, and cross the left leg over to the right. You have a pretty significant reach with that left leg to that right side. And plot the sensation in your hip. So get a feel when that leg is pretty straight. It could bend, but it's not going to be sanded today. So feel the right arm kind of hold. And if this was too much to use your arm muscles to pull it, you can always thread the belt around your ribs, and so it will be held on your rib cage. You not have to use your arms. So there's possibilities with or without holding. I suppose we could have done that. And then bring that leg back up and change sides. So I will just kind of demo that so you get a feel of it. Change the right foot up into the belt and then cross that leg to the left. But I don't know if I got my belt messed up there. Okay. So you'll bring it over, right? And you'd have it at your ribs. I want us to get one hip pose before we go upside down. But it could be like this. Right? So you can move from brain foot and then just take your belt down your rib cage and then cross it over. And this is nice. It's very it's a complex hip pattern posturally. It's like I'm dressed for Easter today or something. I've got all this purple and pink and it's not quite, we're not quite there. All right. Doesn't feel like that outside. So get a feel when that crossover happens. The left leg is really relaxed. You don't want that left leg to be trying to force toes up or anything like that. Okay, now when my pattern of movement cycles from here, now holding the belt can be nice because when you don't have the belt around your ribs, you get this kind of pretty specific pull. So there's benefit to both. Okay. So when you come back up, you're going to take that belt off, okay? You're going to take a roll to get up. So I want us to get to the wall. So I want you to do a little spinal rolling motion, maybe coming up and back, rolling the spine, but it's forward and back, not side to side. Okay, now come on up and push your bolster to a wall or find a wall space in your vicinity here. And then you're going to get a blanket and we're going to take the roll up, okay, so that when you sit on the bolster and you roll to get the feet up, it's best to just kind of keep going and just keep the cycle going till we get that full experience. And as my blanket is underneath, I'm going to add my sand to my feet. So I want you to find where the design of movement now has evolved into this legs pushing a sack of weight. If you have that, if you don't, it can be the legs up the wall. That's fine. I know it's not always in a textbook that it's legs up a sand or it's legs up the wall. So feel where the support of your head feels connected for you. It's not for everybody to have a blanket like this. You might have your blanket straight back, so it's under your head, but there's not a cross. It could be a couple ways with the blanket. And then when I move my arms open, right now it feels best to have my arms just out, not cactus. But you're sensitive to your neck energy, you're sensitive to shoulders, and most importantly to the breath in the belly right now. So feel that motion of the diaphragm and the exhalation. And feel your inhalation so that it experiences a fullness. And the releaseness of the core muscles can feel like they get stronger when you exhale. It's like the round of breath is strengthening for the middle. It's massaging the organs. Calming the nervous system. Now with the shoulders resting, just feel the awareness, the senses taking a bath, eyes closed. Maybe let your head nod from side to side. Now with the breath fairly low in the belly, and who knows, maybe your breath feels like it's high in the rib cage. So consider when you move your feet off the wall, bend your knees, and lose some sand. Consider the feet back up at the wall and this reverse of the downward pull on the organs, right? So just getting your legs up, whether it's a couch or a chair, anything that gets the legs up and head below. Ideally, the pelvis is up so the head is below the heart. That'd be ideal for your cardiovascular system. But just getting the legs up is good for the vascular system in the body. So just kind of consider that part of this practice too. So when I feel that lift, and if the legs aren't too shaky, hooray, some of us might still have some of that power in the legs. It does shift with practice. And some of it may have not happened for years and years. But when you bend your knees, feel that stretch through the whole spine into the pelvis. It's kind of a scoop, kind of scooping the body. It's a back scoop, isn't it? Yeah, and it might feel really nice for you just to kind of be in your back scoop. And let your knees go side to side. The movements generally today were pretty standard, not a lot of wavy kind of movements, right? They're very secure in the joints. So when you cross over from the center line, do go a direction that you feel safe for your shoulders. And roll. And come up. And find a seat, whether you want to sit to the wall, which is sometimes really good, or sit right to the center. But sitting so that you're doing nothing but feeling the shift inside of you from practice. I mean, you're not doing nothing, you're sitting, but so you have some energy with uprightness, but feeling that shift and collecting the consciousness of our practice today. So we let our arms feel releasing down from the shoulders. We feel the neck muscles, and then feel the head tilt to one side. Gently motion through the line of the shoulder to the neck, and then tilt to the other. See if you can keep your heart centered. Keep it slow. And then back, brain bows into the heart, lift up the palms to unite, and feel that measure of connectedness of our practice together, support from others in practice in this way, because it is kind of the way that many of us are practicing. Inhaling behind the heart and exhale, bowing into that space.